Welcome to Scorched Earth and the general reading for the sign of Taurus, Sun, Moon or Ascendant for the month of September 2023. I hope you are well. I'm using the Tarot for you today. Before the reading begins, if you resonate with the reading and you would like to go a little bit deeper, there will be an extended that you can access at the end. That's link number 1 in the description box. The second link is to my private community, the Order of the Phoenix, over on Circle. You can get access to all of the extended content for no extra cost. So you can watch for your moon, you can watch for your ascendant, you can watch for your north node, whatever you like. And you get to hang out with a truly extraordinarily talented and wonderful group of people, and I don't say that lightly. So if that sounds like something that might be of interest to you, you know what to do with that link. Right, Taurus, let's have a look and see what's going on with you. Can I have 3 cards for Taurus, please? Thank you. Do we have the, is that the King or the Queen? Ooh, that's the King of Cups in your recent past. Let's flip that around so you can see what I'm looking at. Tell me about current energy, please, for Taurus. We have the 6 of Swords appearing next. And then what's coming towards Taurus for September, please? We have the 3 of Wands. Right. We've got the Moon card at the bottom of the deck. Now, that's the card of Cancer for me. I know some people read it differently, but it's Cancer for me. And so, interestingly, we've got a little spread of elements here that do not include the Pentacles. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we'll have a look into in a second. But let's get some clarifiers out first and see what we can make of this. So tell me about this King of Cups, please. Thank you. We have the Ace of Cups. Wonderful. Cups. And we have the Queen of Wands. Beautiful. Right there. And what about the 6 of Swords? What is being left behind here by Taurus? Ooh. Goodness, well, we have the Death card, so more Scorpio energy, and we have the 8 of Swords in reverse, because it did land reversed there. Tell me about the 3 of Wands, please. Ooh, Taurus, what are you up to? We've got the Tower, and we've got the 8 of Cups. Right. Well, be under no illusion that there is movement happening for you this month. And it's not just happening once. It's not just happening in your current energy and that's it. And it's not just happening in your future energy. It seems like there's a movement here. Absolutely. This feels very foundational. This feels like the movement away from something. Because we've got the 6 of Pentacles there. Now, 6 of Pentacles talks about balance. Right? It talks about achieving balance. It can sometimes talk about the need to achieve balance. It can even talk about things like charity and stuff like that. But we've got the moon here. Now the moon for me is, well, strictly on the surface, it talks about things that are hidden, right? It talks about things that are obfuscated. I mean, you think about how things appear by the light of the moon. It's very different to how they appear by the light of the sun, right? Sometimes detail is missed. Things have an etheric quality. Think about the dream space, right? Because that would be ruled by the moon as well. But the way that I read the cards tends to see the moon more as what's happening on a very deep psychological level for you. I mean, the moon can talk about intuition, and so it heightened, increased intuition, increased connection to things of a more symbolic nature, perhaps. When it shows up here with the 6 of Pentacles, it does rather feel like you're ordering something in your subconscious, right? Something that's been kind of a bit free-flowing, that's been maybe is a little bit chaotic, is now being grounded in some sort of way. And the way that that grounding is occurring likely would be simply by your understanding of what it is that your subconscious, non-conscious, unconscious is trying to show you about a particular situation. It could be trying to show you something about your life. It could be trying to show you something about your relationships, or it could be trying to show you something really fundamental about you. Because when I said here that this King and Ace of Cups and this Queen of Wands felt foundational, it does feel exactly that, but it's emotionally stabilizing, I think. You know, the king of any suit is the active masculine expression of the suit that he represents, right? So we're not just talking about how we feel about things, we're talking about how we actively express that. And I think that the combination of these three cards together, because the Ace of Cups, more often than not, I do believe denotes relationship with self more than anything else. I know people talk about it in terms of new love and things like that, but I couldn't be less interested in those kind of interpretations, right? There are very many people who are out there doing that sort of thing and doing it very, very well. My interest is what happens before you get to the relationship, what happens within you when you're in a relationship. Now, when I'm talking about relationships, I'm not even talking about significant others or anything like that. I'm talking about every relationship that you have with a person that is not you, every consciousness that is not you. Interesting, I had such a go at my postman the other day because he came through the gate, right, and dropped stuff off in the conservatory, and then it was like he was swearing at my dogs so fucking hard, and my dogs weren't doing anything wrong. Oh, they were trotting alongside him being like, hey, not barking, not attacking, not doing any of these things at all. And yeah, I'd hear him cursing at the dogs, really aggressive. It was when the moon was in Scorpio. I went and barked so fucking hard at him and told him not to come into the property again. I put a fucking postbox up on the end of the gate. I don't talk to my dogs like that. What the fuck? They were being really nice. They're really sweet dogs. Anyway, rant aside, I think you can tell a lot about a person by the way that they treat animals, right? So when I say literally everything else that has a consciousness, I really do mean that, because that postie's in my fucking shit bin now, right? He is not a good person. He can talk to dogs like that. He doesn't talk to people like that. Anyway, I dislike abuses of power. I really dislike abuses of power. And the interaction twixt dog and human, there's an imbalance of power there. The dog doesn't know it, but the human does. I'm going to stop because I'm going to end up ranting for ages. But that was a hard fucking boundary. Don't talk to my dogs like that. Everything with a consciousness. How do you interact with it, right? And what does it show you about the way that you are feeling about yourself? Because ultimately that is what the Ace of Cups talks to me about. We treat others the way that we treat ourselves. So if you're aggressive and at very least impolite to a dog that's just trotting along beside you, the chances are you've got some stuff going on inside, or you don't really like yourself very much either, right? Maybe you're a little bit afraid of the world, those sorts of things, right? So every relationship that you have is a mirror to you in some way. This feels like a very active engagement with your sense of self. You know, the Ace of Cups can talk about compassion. It can talk about a gentle kind of self-love. Even that phrase 5 years ago would have made me vomit on my own shoes if somebody had suggested that I should do that to myself. And maybe you felt the same, Taurus. I think it's probably more likely that you've tried really, really hard because you have understood on some sort of level that you couldn't quite fathom that it was an important thing, TM, that you should do. And note the word should there. I think that's been something that's ruled Taurus for a very long time. But it's like the connection to it was difficult to achieve. It's like, okay, well, I've been told that self-love looks like having a bubble bath and having a glass of wine when we feel like one, you know, a conscious relaxation. But it never really seemed to get to you in enough of a way to stop you from being anxious, to stop you from overthinking, to stop you being possibly a people pleaser, to stop you needing to be there for everybody else, because your very value was predicated on whether or not that person was happy. Like, we're so far beyond that now, Taurus, it's not even funny. Like, the work that you have done in the last 3 years, it's absolutely extraordinary. But the work is never done, and we know that. And I think one of the interesting things that I've noticed about Taurus is that although you like to have a goal and you like to work towards things, and often you will break things down so that they are achievable, manageable things. You don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed by it. It's like, well, just start. We eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? So this bit, I'm going to work on this, and I'll work on this, and I'll work on this, and it'll all come together, and there's a goal at the end, and that's awesome. Yeah. There's a much more fluid take that you have on the management of your emotions now. I think there is a recognition that it is a constant process. It is not something that you work through and then you put down because it's done, thank you very much. It's a consistent thing, and it needs reinforcing. And if you do not spend the time reinforcing, repeating these behaviours of self-care and talking your brain down when it starts trying to go up a height and whatnot, it is possible to fall off the carriage of progress that you have followed, if you will, progress that you have made. So it's this constant readjustment, constant awareness, this mindfulness, I think, is what I'm kind of getting at here, where you're like, yeah, this takes effort, but it's worth it because of how I feel afterwards. Now, I do feel like since the last time I spoke to you, there's been more of an investment than usual in treating yourself kindly, in connecting with that idea of self-love, right? There's a huge compassion in the way that you are dealing with yourself, which by extension means that there's a much more compassionate take, I think, that you have on other people too. Where you might have got a little bit neurotic about things in the past, it's like you're allowing yourself to let things go. You're allowing yourself to be compassionate to yourself. And a lot of the judgment and things like that that you practiced by default on yourself just isn't there anymore. But what's happened recently, like I said, is it feels like there's much more of an investment in this. And there are all sorts of reasons why this might be happening. I don't know about you, but I found Venus retrograde really, really crunchy, actually. There were some really difficult themes that came up there for me to deal with. I told people in personal readings, I did a shed load of readings over July, that I'd been doing a fair amount of wrestling with my own shadow too, right up until the point where I realised I wasn't supposed to be trying to wrestle it. I was trying to sit with it and listen to what it had to say, and then everything improved, which is, exactly how these things happen. But there's been a lot of tension. There's been a lot of things going on. July and August seem to me to have been longer than the rest of the year put together, simply because of just how much stuff was coming up. So there has been tension. There have been things that we've needed to work through. There have been external stresses too. And the energy seems to have kicked up quite a bit on the global front in the last few weeks. And it's like there's this consistent bombardment of things that we need to be terrified about. A consistent bombardment of things that are taking us away from our work, which is it's a thing. It's totally a thing. So whether this has come about as a response to what you are perceiving outside of yourself, kind of like as things get crunchier, so I need to invest more time in what it is that makes me feel emotionally grounded, emotionally stable, because the King of Cups is very emotionally stable. But it is this kind of active participation in your own emotional well-being. Like you cannot allow it to drift. It has to be constantly invested in, constantly monitored, constantly taken care of. And this Queen of Wands, I feel, is taking on much more of a fluid role than she usually would do, in processing everything that is going on. Right? Because there's a combination of factors at play here, which is how you feel plus what it is that you need to do, either in response to how you feel or in response to external stressors that have been coming in. Because she's the internal subjective experience of the Wands suit, right? She's like, how do you feel about what you do? Right? The Queens, often their role is to make sense of things. Where the king is doing something, the queen is making sense of it. And it could be that you're looking at your behaviours and you're examining your behaviours and you're treating those with a light touch too. It's like, the harder things get, the gentler I have to be with myself, because otherwise it's too easy to circle the drain, in whatever way that applies to you, whether you have a predisposition towards depression. And honestly, I think probably Taurus does, not because you're a particularly depressive sign. Actually, quite the reverse. I find you to be very supportive and very optimistic, because you're very resourceful, right? So very solution-oriented thinking. If there is a problem, how do we fix it? How do we do this efficiently? Right? It's very, very practical, very, very resourceful. But the experiences that you have had throughout your life have had you, I always mention this Aquarius friend of mine who once said, before deciding you're depressed, you should make sure first that you are not surrounded by arseholes. And I cackled, because it's absolutely correct. And I think your biggest issue, Taurus, was often that you were surrounded by arseholes. The deeper question is, why? Like, how did you allow them into your life? Why did you allow them into your life? And how were they holding up a mirror to you to show you where you were not being kind to yourself, right? Now, I think that depressive tendencies, let's go with that rather than depression. Is it that, or is it a very natural response to being treated the way that you have been? I remember when I went to see a grief counsellor after my husband died, and it was about a year later, I think, because I kind of realised that I'd been losing my mind a little bit. Like, I'd pushed all of my grief to the side so that I could look after everybody else, because everybody else wasn't coping and somebody needed to do it. And so I did it, obviously, but I didn't realise that I had completely pushed all of that to the side. And after a year, it started to be obvious that it was kind of leaking out somewhere. So I went to go and see a grief counsellor, and I only met with her once, because I sat down and talked to her, and I told her about everything that had happened in the last year or so. And she said, "You're not depressed." And I went, "Really?" She's like, "No." She's like, "You're not mad either." And I was like, "Oh." She said, "You're having a very reasonable response to an extremely traumatic event. Like, it would be weird if you didn't feel like this." And I was like, okay. I was like, "So I don't need grief counselling then?" And she was like, "No, I think you're working your way through it really quite well, but it's a big thing that's happened here. It's taking time to work through it. Like, just be kind to yourself." And do you know what? It was the best thing that she could have said, because I did take the time to be a little kinder to myself after that. And the reason that I'd gone there in the first place was because other people had told me that I was being a little bit batshit, and I was like, don't think so. There was a lot of projection there. Anyway, I think that's the experience that you've had over the course of your life. It's a very natural response to not being treated the way that you should have been treated. But that stemmed from not treating yourself the way that you need to be treated. So this is glorious. This is very, very strong, and what we would expect from you, Taurus, actually. Not to throw expectation into the mix, but seeing how you have developed over the last 3 years it does not surprise me at all that you are sensing that now is a time where, or have sensed that now is a time where you need to be more and more and more compassionate to yourself than you ever have done before, even though circumstances outside of you might lead you down the wrong path otherwise. Now, when we get into your current energy, where you are right now, we have the Six of Swords, and it is followed by Death and the Eight of Swords in reverse. This is huge. Not least, I mean, even just start with this Eight of Swords here, right? Overthinking, something that Taurus does beautifully, or rather did beautifully. Now, there may still be shades of it that pop up every now and again, but I think by and large, on the whole, you recognize in yourself your capacity to think yourself into a hole, circling the drain, as I put it before. And there's an awareness of when that you feel yourself being kind of pulled into the tide, and you are able to say to yourself, oh, I know where we're going. It's okay. We don't need to go there. I'm going to pull myself back from the edge, stop myself getting sucked into the vortex. Just move back a little bit, right? Really take really sensible kind of precautionary measures. Just be like, if I allow myself to keep walking down this path, I know where this goes, and I also know correspondingly how much effort it takes to get myself out of there. So I'm not going to do that, right? Okay. That is very restrictive thinking. This becomes liberation from that. But there's something more than that going on here in your current energy, because we do have the Death card, which speaks loosely to endings, but really it speaks to a state of transformation that is being undergone. And when I talk about transformation, we're not talking about you turning from like Clark Kent into Superman or anything like that. What we're talking about is something fundamental on a deep psychological level that is shifting to the degree that your reality is shifting in front of you with that, right? Certain things that we held to be absolutely concrete, right? An absolute pillar of reality, immovable, unshakable, all those sorts of things. It's a recognition that though you be fixed, and I'm fixed as well, I'm Leo, and more than that, you're fixed Earth, so you are designed to be sturdy and stable, that there isn't much that exists within you that doesn't contain a degree of malleability should you permit it to be so. We talk often on this channel about constructing your own reality, and I think the biggest aspect of this, I mean, we can talk about manifestation, right? And we talk about the power of positive thinking and all those kind of things, right? But I really do feel like that's often jumping the gun, because what you need to do first is eradicate the things that are stopping you from just being comfortable in your own fucking skin. How the fuck are you supposed to manifest a perfect life for yourself if you feel like that character from Men in Black, Vincent D'Onofrio played, with the alien wearing the fucking man suit, and over the course of weeks it becomes, increasingly misshapen and gross. I can feel like a lot of humans walk around in that state. They're kind of like, I don't fit in my skin, and it feels weird, and it's awful. There's no peace there. And all of the things that we think that we want for our life, quite often, not quite often, almost always, we are sabotaging our capacity to even get there, So this careful, meticulous sifting through of the psyche, taking things out that don't belong there, and doing it very deliberately, being very mindful about the workings of our mind and analysing what is going on in things, right? It is a change of state because it's changing your reality, but it's changing your reality because it's changing your perception of what is going on out there in the world, in here, in this room right now, in the room that you're sitting in. The degree to which you are able to influence things, I think, is starting to reveal itself to you. I think you're starting to get it in a really quite tangible way. We talked quite a lot at the beginning of this journey that you find yourself on now about Well, I guess trauma, right? So we're all born at this point of neutrality here, right? And then we have life experiences that drags us down, and we end up down here, right? Like kind of grubbing along in the bottom, just trying to exist, just trying to cope with everything, just trying to do the best that we can. And, you know, life knocks the stuffing out of you. And when you're down there, we can think of nothing more than just getting back to that neutral place, where there is an absence of things that kick the stuffing out of us, right? And I think a lot about the last few years, as maybe it's 2022 to I don't know, maybe it's the beginning of 2022, right? It was about climbing up to get to that point of neutrality, right? But now you're there, you perceive that there's so much more that you could achieve. And it isn't about the eradication of things that stress you out. It's about being strong, and enjoying the fact that you are strong, right? Being empowered and being able to make really good decisions about your life. I think that's really important for fixed signs, because our whole shtick is carrying the season. I think it's really, really important that we are able to be resilient and consistent, and you know, we want to learn from our mistakes. We want to make sure that we're carrying the season to the best of our ability. So, the transformation that's going on here, I feel, is an unwillingness to be sucked into the vortex of fear, of doubt, of overthinking, of all of the things that you have spent your entire life experiencing. I think quite simply Taurus is done with that shit. He's completely done with it. But very mindfully keeping an eye on what is transpiring, keeping an eye on you, keeping an eye on everybody else, keeping an eye on all these things around, and in this constant state of adjustment. Now, in the current energy, we can pull it back to that, and I'll stop going off on little side quests here. The Six of Swords represents a movement away from something. Now, if it showed up on its own, and very rarely does the Six of Swords show up on its own, there's usually the Eight of Cups knocking around somewhere fairly close to. It's statistically improbable how often these two cards come out together. We have a card that is representing the workings of the mind, rationality, reason, all those kind of things, right? It's what you think, it's what you say, it's and you know, I went off on a whole info dump on my partner last week about the significance of language and culture, and how language actually shapes the culture that you're in, right? So, and sort of drew distinctions between Italian people and German people, right? And you can always see the difference in the culture when you look at the structures of the language. You know, German is extremely predictable. It follows a very precise and efficient grammatical structure. It looks a bit confusing when you first look at it, but it's like, it makes sense. So, and Italian, it's not that Italian doesn't make sense, but it's much less mechanistic, I would say. You know, it's passionate, and there's lots of vowels instead of lots of consonants, which is what you tend to find in German. You know, and then, like, you know, comparing it to English, and I went off on this whole spiel about how English was essentially dishonest and a little bit deceptive, and probably this is one of the reasons why everybody else in the world hates the English, more or less. You know, why was I telling you about that? Ah, yes, the workings of the mind. There's a cultural aspect, I think, to the swords then, because if the act of communication and the way, the manner by which you choose to communicate creates your culture, and your culture creates the pillars for your experience of reality, which, let's face it, is going to be very, very different depending where you are in the world. Then this Six of Swords represents a leaving behind of a way that you have thought about things, a way that you have expressed things, a way that you have understood the machinations of the universe, in favour of some sort of transformative action here that is releasing you from perhaps the likelihood of ever getting stuck in an Eight of Swords again. Well, that's not strictly true. I mean, those cards come up all the time, right? It could be a recognition of literally how much power you have given away by the way that you think about things in the past. And we see that here. I mean, the Six of Swords would absolutely be a departure from that kind of energy. But it's when the thing that we often say about Tauruses is, right, Tauruses like their little corner of the universe, right? And it's got a picket fence and a nice garden, and it's well tended, it's well maintained. Because Taurus likes what they know, and they know what they like. Well, I think that there's an expansion here. So I know what I know, and I know what I like. I like what I know, and I know what I like. But maybe I might like something else as well. Right? And it's that willingness to start pushing the picket fence out considerably further than it would have been before, for the sake of the experience, because something in you has changed, right? Something, obviously lots of things about you have changed, but something about, very fundamental about the way that you think has changed. And it's got this basis here with this, emotional stability and all that sort of stuff. But it is literally changing the way that you are processing information. And I think that this is really, really important, Taurus, because I don't know if you've noticed this about yourself, but this is definitely something that has happened. And it's wonderful because it again is speaking to exponential growth, and we've all seen lots of that this year. But it does rather seem to be, just as this was a foundation for this now seems to be forming the foundation for what is happening for you in September. Because the Three of Wands is about action. It's about the things that you do. Interestingly enough, over the last few months, I've started to see this card speaking to what we might term changed behaviour, right? The way that we have done things versus the way that we are going to do things in the future, because the way that we did it before isn't working for us any longer. Now, it could be that this is in response to a particular issue that is arising, possibly, but I do feel like it's kind of spooling up here. It almost looks like what am I seeing over the top of this? The golden spiral. You ever seen that? Right, we're starting with these small internal movements here, these small internal shifts, and it's catching this here, and then it's growing. It's becoming huge. There's maths involved in that, and I'm not very good at maths, so I'm going to kind of just end that there. But that's what I can see over the top of these cards here. Now, we've got the Tower and we've got the Eight of Cups. I don't feel like this is you walking away from a Tower situation. I think this is you causing a Tower situation, which is to say, changing direction for the purposes of giving yourself more emotional space than you have had before. And like all of these steps that preceded it were very necessary preconditions that needed to be put in place before you were ready to make some really fucking big moves. Now, I want to pull up another deck here because I do feel like there's quite a lot going. Yeah, I thought it was you. Come here. John Bauer. September is a month of action for you. We see that in the Three of Wands. It isn't contemplation of action. Likely, contemplation of action started here. The seed of something was planted back down here, and whether you've been consciously aware of it or not, I think in the recent past, And let's go with, say, maybe 6 weeks out maximum. But it could be this morning, depends. The seed that's been planted has been this kind of vague contemplation, perhaps without even articulating what it is that you're thinking about. It started back here in terms of your understanding of what it is that you do, your understanding of what it is that you feel, and how that shows itself in what it is that you do. Now, I think even this Queen of Wands here, she's actually looking up there as these cards sit here, and there's a woman here in the Three of Wands who is looking down at the Queen of Wands here. These two cards feel connected to me. So what started off back down here, without necessarily even, like I said, the words to articulate what it was that you were feeling, there was something that was just starting to take root in here. Now, I have this issue all the time because I don't think in words. I think in feelings and things like that, which is what enables me to be a concurrent thinker, because you cannot have 50 thought streams going on at the same time if your own voice is narrating them. Oh, that sounds horrifying to me, by the way, just want to say. It's much more abstract than that. And sometimes I can feel something shifting around in there, and I know that my mind's picked up on something and it is now following a string, but as yet it hasn't quite presented itself in enough of a way that I would be able to articulate it to somebody else, right? We're definitely going with some sort of feeling that started a little while ago, which is now, through the process of transformation, leaving things behind and refusing to allow our minds to be restrictive in the way that they have been before. There's a whole new set of actions that are now, I think, in September, presenting themselves to you as possibilities. Like, we're not talking about the kind of, this spontaneous opportunism of, say, the Knight of Wands or something like that. Like, your eyes are just peeled and there's an opportunity and you're going to pounce on it. I feel like this has been a bit of a slow burn with you, and perhaps at the time where something was going on inside and you weren't quite sure what it was, you didn't really know where it was going to go either. But now you've arrived here, it's very clear to you that the originating point was back down here. Now, this tower, like I said, this change of direction, it feels very much like it is instigated by you. So there's a certain track that you have been on for a while. There's been a corresponding kind of like about something, and I don't think that there's a tower happening at you in September. I think there are maybe a small series of events that happen at you that are kind of pushing all of this to a point where it's just kind of popping into your consciousness now, and you're like, that's what this is. Right, I need to go in a different direction. Like, I've been having rumblings for a little while and I didn't know what they were, but now all of these things have happened, and it's showing me that actually the course that I need to divert to is quite considerably further away from that than I thought it was. The tower, like I said, instigated by you, isn't something that you're responding to. It's something that you're creating. About this tower, please. There's the tower here. King of Pentacles, right? Well, I'm going to take that as confirmation that you are instigating the tower. And we've got the Emperor card. Well, fuck me, Taurus. Look at this. You've got the tower at the bottom of the deck. You have the King of Pentacles and the Emperor here. You seem to me to be upping your game in September. Now, that's going to mean different things to different people, but remember that each of the kings is an aspect of the Emperor. The Emperor is the King of Kings. So he is the King of Swords, the King of Wands, the King of Pentacles, and the King of Cups, all rolled in together. You already have two kings on the table. What this is saying is, at the point where you bring the tower, you are upping the ante on everything, and you are taking control. Now, I think that this is really important, because if this was this way round here, there is absolutely no way that you would be engaging with the energy of the Emperor in September, because he'd be like, oh, but I'm so small, I can't do anything, I'm so ineffective, you know, I have no power. And that's been a real fear, I think, for Taurus for a long time. I don't really have any power. Or maybe the issue is I have too much power and I don't know how to fucking wield it. Like, either one of those would put you in this state here. But it seems like there's so much playing out here across these cards that is speaking to a level of certainty, a self-possessedness that, if you think about it too hard, feels a little bit alien, but at the same time it is so familiar, because it is so intrinsically you. I mean, what I feel here is there is a no shying away from the power of the bull in this situation. I don't know how it is that we do it as human beings. Like that totally contrary notion of feeling completely powerless, and also absolutely shit scared of the level of power that we actually have access to. And whether it's and it's not about responsibility, because Taurus, like Leo, tends to take responsibility for everything. Literally everything. You're looking around, oh, you can't take responsibility. I'll do that. And before we know it, our back is fucking breaking, but we're still, still in commando crawling along, being like, it's fine, I've got this. A lot of this year, particularly, has seen you stripping out responsibilities that don't belong to you. And there's a lot that's gone into that process, because by extension, what you're having to do is slough off any desire to be perceived in a certain way. What people pleasing is a kind of indirect way of controlling people's view of you. It's like, I need them to see me like this. I need them to think that I'm competent. I need them to think that I'm thoughtful. I need them to think that I am all of these good things, because I am fucking horrified at the prospect that I might not be any of those things, right? Big shadowy themes here. But this seems to have fallen by the wayside in 2023, almost holistically. It wasn't like one day you put it down. It's almost just like it's decreasingly important, and it's been winding its way down naturally. And you hadn't maybe even noticed the extent to which that has happened. But now, freed up as you have been to take responsibility purely for that which is yours, suddenly we realise that the bucket that we've been carrying around, we've been fixing the leaks in. Like the energy, the power is not just falling out of the bucket through the myriad holes that have been in the bottom of it. Like we're clearing that shit up. Which means instead of an empty bucket, a permanently empty bucket, you have a full bucket. You've got power, you can do things with it. More than that, you've got energy. I think for a lot of you, there's been like a somatic representation of the stresses and the difficulties that you've had that have begun to clear up this year. I know a few Tauruses for whom that's the case. And whether it's just because you've got the spoons now to actually attend to the things that have been wrong with you, or whether it is you're not carrying around everybody else's shit to the extent that your body is even starting to complain about it now. You just feel better. You feel more able to do what it is that you need to do. And September is all about identifying what you need to do and just fucking doing it. There's no prevarication here. There's no there's no second guessing. There's no gaslighting yourself. Taurus, you did used to do that a lot. Virgo also. There's a couple of other signs that tend to do it too. All that's gone. Instead, what we have is a situation that is now making sense. The feeling is making sense. The reason why you felt a little bit uncomfortable about a particular thing is making sense. The reason why you feel enthusiastic about a particular thing is also making sense. Like, it doesn't need to be on one side or the other here, Taurus, because they're the two sides of the same coin. You know, the things that you feel good about are things to feel good about. The things that feel less good are because probably you need to be moving away from those. But it is your intuition, it is your deep connection to your intuition that is guiding you one way or the other. Now, I think that your intuition's going to kick in pretty fucking hard in September, and it's like, nah, we need to move away from something. So we've got a mental moving away from something, but we also have an emotional moving away from something. This isn't a situation that is going to have you feeling guilty or feeling like you've abandoned someone, or you've abandoned a project, or you've not lived up to expectations, anything like that. Like that isn't even, it seems, entering your mind space at all. You're like, no, I'm an emperor, I'm going to do these things, I'm going to get this done. Like, this tower's come up twice. There are big changes coming in September, and you're initiating them all. And it's like, it doesn't really matter what it is that you're doing, because obviously for each of you it's going to be different. This is a collective energy reading, right? But it's this theme of engaging with the process that is representing the huge collective leap up for Taurus. It's like, I'm going to put down, like, this is the crux of what's actually happening here. I'm putting down any kind of emotional investment in making myself feel bad about anything, second guessing my decisions, all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to go and do this thing because I can. Oh, this is interesting. I've just remembered what I called your video last year, last month. It was like the pivot of the bull that no one saw coming. Like, you saw it coming, you knew it was coming. This is different. This is a different pivot. Like, fucking hell. Like, Taurus, you seem to be zigzagging across the field. I remember I was in, where was I? It's in Boscastle in Cornwall. And I walked past a gate and it said, you know, do not cross this field unless you can do it in 9.8 seconds, because the bull can do it in 10. Right. And it's interesting because we just assume that bulls will run in a straight line. Probably takes quite a lot to change direction when you're that big. But a bull that would run zigzag suddenly is more terrifying than one that runs in a straight line, because, you know, otherwise it just zigzag. Like the matadors, step out of the way of the bull. There's an adaptability and a flexibility, a fluidity that is now coming into the way that you are dealing with the world outside of you, right? And it's mapping directly onto this fluidity that I was talking about at the beginning here. As within, so without. You made these big changes here, and in a very, very short space of time, you are making big changes outside of you too. This connection between the gaze of the Queen of Wands and this woman here in the Three of Wands is impossible to ignore. But then these two very masculine energies here of the King of Pentacles and the Emperor, even the energy of the Tower, which is innately masculine, you know, big changes are afoot. And the wonderful thing about this for you, Taurus, is you're getting confirmation at every single step that the moves that you are making are the right ones. When you lean into your intuition, when you listen to what it is saying, and you act accordingly, every last bit of that gives you a little bit more confidence about doing it again in the future. And so this spiral that I see that is taking in all of these is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, its area of effect is increasing. Like, Taurus, you're taking up space. Do you remember back in 2020 when I was talking about how Taurus seem to kind of walk around on their tippy hooves and they're sucking the ribs in and they're just trying desperately not to knock anything over? And I said then, like, you need to learn to take up space. You've been doing that. You've been studiously working on that for the last 3 years. But this feels like the point where you're not having to work on it anymore. It's just happening. You know, have you ever looked at someone who's, someone who's doing a presentation or some sort of speaker or something, and they're so confident, they're so engaging, and everything just seems so effortless with them. You kind of look at them and you think, God, I wish I could do that. Like, that's really cool. Like, that level of confidence, body confidence, mental confidence, emotional confidence, it's attractive, it's engaging. And it's that effortless aspect of it, I think. It's not forced. That's where you are right now, Taurus. This is the side of you that you are starting to show people. And it's not that you're going to sit there and give yourself a pat on the back and go, God, I'm so engaging and awesome, I'm just brilliant. It's more like, it doesn't occur to you to overthink. It doesn't occur to you to be afraid. It doesn't occur to you not to be confident in what it is that you're doing. And I think that in essence is what confidence actually is. Of course you're going to open your mouth and put your input in. Of course you're going to disagree if somebody comes up with a stupid idea, like, you're going to tell them nicely, but you're going to veto that shit because you've got a better idea, or you can see at least how bad that one is. This speaking up feels really strong. And there's no feeling self-conscious about it. There's no feeling like you don't have the right to say anything about it. You just feel very naturally confident, powerful, assertive. And that's not to say if somebody points it out to you that you might go, oh God, fuck, right, look at it, look, and lose yourself in your head about it for a few minutes. But you'll bring it back. Like, September feels like an extraordinary month for you. There are, honestly, every reading that I've done so far seems to be indicating September is a big month of change and transition for everyone. I've seen some of the mundane astrology that suggests that we might be seeing an increase in things that are designed to distract us going on out there in the world. But I'm not entirely sure that you're distractible anymore, Taurus. And that's fucking magnificent. Right, I'm going to go over to the extended now because we got loads to talk about, I think. If you would like to join me over there, you're very welcome. You can join me on Vimeo, you can join me in Circle. But if neither of those apply, I always just keep putting those bull hooves one in front of the other and take up all the fucking space that you need, Taurus, because you've earned it. It is your birthright. And the contributions that you have are extremely valuable. We're grateful to have them, and you should remember that. You should be grateful to have your very kind, very loving, very compassionate contributions. All right, know that I love you all very, very much, and I'll see you soon.